Take charge of your thoughts. Take charge of your life.
Psychologist, author, speaker, musician, former professor, and the host of Love and Life, Dr. Karen Anderson Averill.
Welcome to Dr. Karen Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karen Anderson Averill. On today's program, we're talking about dating after divorce. Many of you have reached out to me and have asked me questions about how can you trust again after your heart has been shattered after a divorce? Or how can you possibly get back out there? You were married for 20 years and the dating scene seems so different and so daunting. So I wanted to bring in an expert to really tackle this concern. And because I've not been divorced, you know that. I called off a wedding and I spent 27 years on the dating scene, but I have not been married and divorced before. So I wanted to be sure I brought someone in who had expertise in this particular realm. And I've done that. So later in the program, we will talk to Ané Auret, who won the UK Dating Expert of the Year award and knows a lot about recovering from divorce, finding hope again, and moving forward. So we'll bring Ané in just a moment. But I wanted to start with some psych nerd stuff, something that could kind of ground us in some research. Because the question I get so often is, how can I trust again? How can I have hope again? How can I have faith again? And I always say hope is such a powerful thing. But why? Why is hope so powerful? And of course, it goes back to mindset and our frame of mind, which we talk about all the time in the program. But then it occurred to me as I was thinking about someone, so for example, someone who's been hurt, someone who's maybe been cheated on, someone who's left a relationship so scarred and so devastated that they now look at love and romance and relationships with a horribly negative lens. And it's understandable. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's understandable. I have been there, felt that. You guys know that. I've had times when I thought, love isn't for me. It can't be. It's just not meant to be for me. And I know some of you have felt that as well. But what happens is that when we step into that mindset, we step into what psychologists call a confirmation bias. And what this means is that if I start to think, so for example, if I'd let the negativity overwhelm me after several heartbreaks, if I'd let it become my mindset, my lens through which I view the world, if I'd let it become all guys are out to hurt me, they're all dogs, they're all players, and they're all worthless, and none of them have any good intentions, and I'm just going to be played by them every last time. If that's my schema for men, that's another psych term we talk about, schema, which is basically just like my conception, my understanding. If I let that become my understanding of men, then I now see men through that lens such that, and this is the interesting part, I have what we call a confirmation bias. And here's the crazy thing. I will now interpret what I see through that lens to confirm that lens, to confirm that perception, conception, or schema. So I'm now not just seeing what's in front of me. I am projecting onto what's in front of me what I believe to be true. So let me give you an example. Unrelated to dating, but it will make sense nonetheless. So if I have an ageist notion about, let's say, elderly people are bad drivers. They drive too slowly and they mess up traffic patterns, right? Which I don't have because I'm not ageist, but some people hold this notion. So here's the thing. Say I'm driving down the road and I see 15 people. I'm on a road trip and I'm driving for 2 hours and I see 15 people who are elderly. And let's say that accurately speaking, factually speaking, only one of the 15 is actually driving too slowly in the left lane on the highway. But here's the deal. According to confirmation bias, that's the one of the 15, mind you, but that's the one I will notice and remember. The other 14 who were driving normally, and driving like any 25, 35-year-old, I will not even notice. I will dismiss them, and I certainly won't remember them. Now let's bring it back to dating. My conception of men, if I decide that they're all dogs, what am I going to see? I'm going to see dogs. Why? Because I may see 25 guys in a given day, and the only ones that I'm going to notice and remember are going to confirm my bias. They're going to confirm my conception, my schema of men. So if I've gone through heartbreak, divorce, or otherwise, and I've decided that the people that I am romantically attracted to are now no good, if I lock into that belief, then based on confirmation bias, I will see what I believe to be out there. I will dismiss and not notice the good guys, the guys that really want to be a loyal, faithful partner. I won't even notice them. So bringing it back to hope. Why is hope powerful? Because it starts with my belief. If I believe there's hope, if I believe that no matter how badly I've been hurt, that there are good people out there, that there are guys out there who would love me and be faithful to me and be true to me, if I believe that, if I can maintain that hope, then I alter my bias. And my hope provides me with a confirmation bias that causes me to do what a confirmation bias does, to actively seek out experiences that will support my beliefs. And my belief here is that good guys are out there. So now I'm expecting to meet good guys, and I'll notice them and remember them more than the jerks out there, because the good guys are confirming my beliefs. They're confirming that bias. And in a way, we're using what we know about our cognitive processes and what we know from the psych research about confirmation bias to harness our mind, to take charge of our mind so that it can work toward our goals and help us achieve what we want: a loving, caring, faithful relationship. The hope keeps me from a bias that doesn't serve me, a bias that would literally cause me to dismiss the good people out there, the bias that would cause me to lock into, to only notice those who are confirming my negative schema of love. So hope's powerful, and our mindset is powerful.
I'm Audrey Mann Cronin, creator of mobile app Like So, your personal speech coach. My mission is to empower all of us to express ourselves articulately and with confidence, which is exactly why I'm a fan of Love and Life and Dr. Karen's philosophy of taking charge.
And now, as promised, I'm pleased to welcome the UK Dating Awards Dating Expert of the Year, Ané Auret. Ané, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about, in your bio, you mentioned that you came to this space and to have this expertise in part through your own experience, having been divorced and then looking for love again yourself. Let's talk a little bit about what sorts of insights you came across along the way that help you now coach the women that you coach.
Sure. I got divorced in my mid-30s, actually at a time where I thought I was going to be, at a high in my life, shall I say. I thought, I'm going to have an amazing home, amazing husband, amazing lifestyle, having a family, did really well in my career. This is kind of the vision that I had for my future. And, that was it was all on track. And then all of a sudden finding myself, having to start over in every area. I think so many people can relate. It's just such a cataclysmic thing that happens in your life when your marriage breaks down. And I think one of the biggest things is the loss of your future, the way that you saw it and the way that you hoped for and the way that you dreamt about it. But also, on the other hand, what I learned in the process is that as sad as it was probably, given the two people that we were and given the things that we were dealing with each other, but also within ourselves, that was probably inevitable that our relationship was going to break down because we were both dealing with things in ourselves. Many of the reasons why my previous relationships didn't work out was part of the reason why my marriage didn't work out. And I never took the time throughout my 20s and until I got married when I was 30 to actually really get to know myself properly. I thought I did, but not in the way that I needed to sustain a long-term relationship and marriage. I was working against myself, shall I say. So my divorce then gave me the opportunity to go back to my roots, so to speak, and get to the root of what was going on for me.
You bring up so many points I want to underscore, because one of the things you talked about was whether your first marriage was pretty much doomed from the start. And so we did a podcast recently called Relationships Shouldn't Be All That Hard. And people kind of bristle on that because there's a lot of messages in our space about you got to work. And yes, of course, anything that you care about takes nurturing and tending to. But if the relationship is that hard, I'm always fearful that people married the wrong person for the wrong reasons, or they weren't ready. Because another thing that you brought up, that you hadn't done some of the intrapersonal work, the work within yourself to be best prepared for a strong, solid relationship with a life partner. And then the third thing I wanted to underscore, which is so important, it is easy, again, like we said, in hindsight, to look back and everything's so clear, and that divorce was so painful and your world was completely turned upside down at the time. But now you see it, that was the pivot point for you. In your life, you lost everything, but then gained everything because you were able to see the divorce, eventually at least, as an opportunity to rebuild a life that was in line with your gifts and your purpose, that you couldn't possibly have known what your purpose was before. And now you're on another path that's entirely different. And if you hadn't had that, at the time, horrific experience, you wouldn't be in this place of bliss and resonating with your authenticity in the work that you do and the relationship that you're in.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it better myself. But when you say that, is so much of it is that choice that you make to see things a certain way. I realize now, again in hindsight, what a precious time in my life that was. But of course, at the time, if somebody said to me, and maybe somebody is listening to us now who's going through this, if somebody said to me at the time, well, this is a very special, precious time in your life. If you can only, I am the least violent person, but, I would probably have done something or told them in very strong language to go away, I think. But there's something, I think, inside of us that keeps us going, though. Deep inside of us when we go through these big things, that brings us to a point that it's like, okay, you can still choose what you're going to do with it.
Well, and another point that you make that is really consistent with my message, the theme of my podcast is take charge of your thoughts, take charge of your life. And you mentioned that you had the choice to see your divorce in a certain way. And I'm with you, because at the time, I remember having a hideous breakup in my late 30s after I called off my engagement, and then I dated another guy and I thought he was the one, and I fell in love, and then he broke up with me and moved away. And I remember running into a mutual friend just randomly in the streets of Chicago. And he was like, hey, what's going on? How's Dylan? And I said, oh yeah, we broke up. And he looked at me and goes, well, everything happens for a reason. I just wanted to strangle him. And like you, Ané, I am not a violent person, but it seemed so callous. There's that tension that we deal with, you and I having been through what we've been through, wanting to share encouragement, wanting to provide inspiration, and yet also trying to be very sensitive that is sometimes the encouragement, the inspiration is sometimes very hard to receive when people are in that dark moment. One of the hashtags that I tweet out and I put on Insta posts a lot is been there, felt that, because I want to remind my followers and listeners, I have been there and I have felt that. But like you, I also want to provide that little light at the end of the tunnel saying it's not going to be forever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a tricky balance, because there are times when we are ready to hear things. And other times we're just not going to hear it, but that's all part of our process.
Agreed. And things are smooth sailing now. But also the reason that even the reason that I chose the theme of the podcast is that nothing changed. I wasn't able to pull myself out of my depressed moments after, and I'll say seasons, after being broken up with in my late 30s. I'm thinking, here I go again on my own. Is this ever going to work out for me? I wasn't able to pull myself out of that with any kind of magic trick. It was just simply just refusing to let my mind go in that negative space, just saying, no, we're not. And that's the one thing I can control. I can't control that Dylan left. I can't control that my first engagement didn't work out. I can't control that the boys from college. And what I can control is what I will allow to be in my mind and my mental space. That's the only thing I can control.
Absolutely. Looking back now, I became completely not obsessed with, but maybe a little bit, because I'm a bit obsessed with love and dating and relationships. That's why
Right.
we do what we do now. I channeled my energy and my sleepless nights, so to speak, and my mind, instead of going into very, very dark places. At times it did. It absolutely did. But I think that was also necessary, as part of the process. But I found ways of using that time, I didn't think I was wise at the time, but I think it is finding ways of using that time for yourself, but carving out just a little bit of time for you in all of that's going on, to take your mind into a different place, whatever that means to you. Maybe that is a yoga class a week. Maybe it's a coffee date with a friend. Maybe it's a massage. I don't know. Maybe it's just a walk somewhere. It's so, so important. And for me, that just became, because I was completely by myself. I had no family around me. I was in a different country. I just started reading and researching. I tried to learn and to make sense. And that was it's my way of dealing with things. But it really, really
Right.
helped, because it gave me some time out from my head,
Yes.
so to speak. And it was a way of taking control.
Right. Absolutely. I just was going back and forth with someone who we follow each other on Instagram, and she was worried that she was obsessing. And I said some of the littlest things, I just did a blog post on it, some of the littlest things that sound very corny and that they wouldn't work. After one of my really bad breakups, I would rip out the crossword puzzle out of the paper every morning and I would tuck it in my purse. And I was taking the L in Chicago. And so when you're sitting there for a half-hour commute and your mind starts wandering, thinking about the ex and obsessing about it and why didn't it go right and what could I have done differently, I would just stop myself, because I wasn't going to get anywhere with this processing. Of course, we need to be analytical if we can use that analysis to make better choices in the future. But this was now just ruminating. And there's a lot of psych research that looks at the reality that ruminating is associated with depression, because we're ruminating on something that we can't change. It's the past. It's over. It's done. It's not going to help. All this obsessing and overanalyzing. And so I would just distract myself, which sounds so like, really, would that work? But it did.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. It's really simple things like that. So I think, finding really practical ways like that is so, so important. And it's part of your healing. It's part of taking care of yourself. It's part of being kind to yourself. And it's not like you're avoiding things, but it's just, you need to give yourself a break in some way.
Ané, I want to talk about dating post-divorce specifically. What are some of the particular challenges of dating post-divorce, maybe as opposed to just being in the dating scene in general?
Well, now, what I see so often is people just move on very quickly. So sometimes that's out of loneliness, or maybe it's out of boredom, or maybe it's out of just kind of seeing what's out there, just testing the waters. Maybe it's just for sex, because maybe, that was an issue in previous marriage. Whatever the reasons are, if you're coming from a place where you're still healing and you're still hurting, then it's a very difficult place to come into the dating scene. So I would say probably one of the biggest things is take your time, to get back out there again, to get back to where you feel strong and where you feel confident, because you're dealing with doubting yourself and your judgment. You're dealing with the loneliness. You're dealing with your confidence that might have been lost in the process. You're dealing with not feeling very confident and maybe getting intimate with somebody, getting naked again, after your marriage of 25 years and broken down. It's such an emotional roller coaster. And also what happens when you get back into dating is there are all these emotional triggers in any kind of situation. So you might be with a new person and they might say or do something and it actually triggers a really strong emotional response in you, but that's because you haven't healed yet. You're still hurting very much. And there are various bits of work that you can do, working with a coach or whatever is to help you through that process. You don't have to do it alone. Even though it feels very lonely, you don't have to do it alone.
And I would imagine that would be very hard, especially you mentioned someone who's been married for 25 years. They haven't experienced much of adulthood alone. And so with this enormous challenge of rebuilding a life that has absolutely turned upside down, I'm sure it would be very daunting to think, I'm going to do this alone. I haven't paid a bill alone since I was 22, or I haven't made any adult life decision alone. So I think just having to do all those big pieces of work for their life for the first time solo, I think that would be a huge challenge.
It can be. It absolutely can be. And it's also, rediscovering your identity away from this partnership where you've been part of a couple, right? And all of a sudden you're kind of left with you and it's, well, who am I? and who do I want to be? So again, even though this can be some of the toughest times, this is also where the really big catalyst moments are if we choose to see it and to take those opportunities. And I know of so many people who are just so happy second time round. And I know so many amazing women that have reinvented themselves, gone on to have their own businesses, new careers. But, we can come through it. Absolutely.
Everyone knows I love nothing more than a party, which is why I'm so excited to welcome our newest sponsor, Chaotic and Collected Garlands and Party Decor by Jess Downey. Jess creates hip and handmade party supplies. Check them out at chaoticcollectedinc.com. And if your party has a theme that is a little unconventional, Jess is your girl because she loves creating custom designs for your party. Say a hipster baby shower or a craft beer party or my annual wine and cheese soiree. chaoticandcollectedinc.com. So I've had a listener reach out to me to discuss being an early divorcee. She married young and divorced early. And I'm going to read her question to you. She gave me permission to use it on Love and Life, and I wanted to hear your thoughts about it. She says, Dear Dr. Karen, I just wanted to reach out because I've recently found your podcast and wanted to tell you how great they are. I do have a subject I'd like to suggest, being divorced under 30. When I got divorced, most of my friends were just getting married. Very few had been divorced themselves, and if they were, they had children. I find myself very isolated, and I hear a lot of things like, well, at least you didn't have kids. Do you have any advice for me? Gina. So, Ané, any thoughts for Gina?
Oh, Gina, I'm so sorry for what you've gone through. I was 35 and people told me, well, at least you didn't have children yet. And I took that really, really hard. So, I just want to...
Yeah, what is that about? Not to interrupt, I don't understand why that would somehow be comforting to some people.
I don't know. I really... when you're on the receiving end, it's certainly... It's hard, especially if that's part of what you really wanted and was part of your dreams. So, Gina, I know this might not sound like much, but it's a breakup or a divorce is always a second chance, and especially where you are now in your 20s, it's about creating the highest possible vision for yourself and for your life that you want, and to not stop going after that for one moment. But I also, the age thing is very interesting, because I hear concerns about age, whether somebody is in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. Everybody at every stage is concerned about their age for different reasons. But the advice or the support or the thoughts around it, in my view, doesn't really change. It's interesting to hear people's concerns because, I was 35 and I was very concerned about my age because who's going to want me? And I still want to have a family. My perception was that the kind of men that I was interested in 28-year-olds. There certainly wasn't going to want a 35-year-old that still potentially wanted a family. Another client in her 60s, her husband passed away, nearly 40 years of marriage, and she just couldn't see, how was she going to meet somebody? So at various different points, there are concerns about age, and I truly get that. I don't think there's a very easy answer for it.
And it's interesting that you talk about age being a factor. No matter what age your client is, they're probably going to talk about their age. And it's interesting because my next question for you was, what about those in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond? Do you see specific concerns dating post-divorce, or you even mentioned dating as a widow or widower based on age?
Well, most of my clients are women in their late 30s and early 40s, right? So 37 to about 43. And there's a particular pressure there, especially is around our biological abilities and capacity to still have a family. So that's what I often see. On the other side, women in their 30s and 40s often have small children and are very concerned about meeting somebody that is going to want to take on a family with small children, for example. So that's an issue maybe. Something that comes up for women in their 50s, worry about that the men in their age group, they're only interested in women in their 30s and early 40s. For example. And then it's just at every point there are concerns about this. And, it goes both ways. When we look around us, people fall in love at every stage, at every age, every day, all around us.
And it's the meaning, like you're saying, the meaning that you ascribe to your age. Yeah. For Gina, for example, she can make that marriage, she can give it a lot of meaning. And she can look at it as like, oh my gosh, I'm in my 20s and I already had this major life catastrophe. Or she could look at it as, well, some people date for 8 years, 10 years, and then break up and they're 28. Well, I happen to get married, but I don't have to look at it as any more or less than what I choose to give it, the meaning. And the meaning is where the power is, because the meaning that we ascribe to a situation is then feeding the thoughts that we're thinking, which are then feeding the emotions that we're having about a situation. So she could look at this as like, hey, I got divorced. Other people stay in a cruddy marriage for 20 years before they get out. I got out early. Good for me.
You just took the words out of my mouth. Exactly. I would never actively encourage divorce because it's just so traumatic and so destructive. But, realistic enough to know that not all marriages are meant to last. And in this case, I hope, Gina, that you go on and create an amazing future and an amazing relationship, and that you take all the learning that you can take out of this to help you on your journey ahead.
Absolutely.
Dr. Karen Anderson Abril.
I'd love to connect with you on social media. On Instagram, I'm at Dr. Karen, dr.karin. Here I share my thoughts on love and life through original quotes and images. I'd love to have you join the conversation. On Twitter, I'm at Dr. Karen Anderson. You can find me live tweeting my favorite shows, This Is Us, Will and Grace, and my guilty pleasure, All Shows Bachelor Nation. On Facebook, I'm at Dr. Karen Anderson Abril. There you can read my blog, see where I'm speaking, and find links to others' podcasts when I'm a guest on their show. Ané, I've also had several listeners reach out to me asking how they can learn to trust again after infidelity. Do you have any words of advice or recommendations for those who've been betrayed in a marriage or a long-term relationship? And I'm also going to read another listener question for you so we can kind of ground this with Jared's question. He says, hello, Dr. Karen. I recently started listening to your podcast, and I have to say I am very glad I came across them. Over the years, I've struggled with happiness in the world of love. So to hear some of the things you said, it's really brought great enlightenment. I do want to ask or request, because it would be very interesting if you made a segment on how to regain trust in people. I know for me, I went through a series of bad relationships and realized that I lost trust in men and finding real love and happiness. Over the years, I encountered other people, usually men, that think the same way as I do due to a series of bad events. With that said, it would be great to hear your perspective and maybe suggestions on what to do when you haven't lost hope on finding that special someone that makes you happy, but you have a lack of trust. Thanks for your time, and thanks for the informative podcast. And that's Jarrett.
I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, certainly when it comes to trusting other people, is that learning to trust somebody else again is that it's often a reflection on not trusting yourself, because that's that's kind of the starting point, isn't it? That you need to be able to trust yourself. The second thing is to, and I don't want to, sound, can I say this? I'm not Pollyanna about this, but it's easy to become bitter. And I've certainly seen this, when things don't work out. And finding a way of still staying hopeful, so hoping against hope, just keeping that kind of positivity that everybody is not the same, that there are really good people out there, and that you have the capability and the capacity to find one of those people and to be in a relationship with them, is that is absolutely possible for you. But a big part of it, I think, is forgiveness, which is two sides of a coin. Again, forgiving yourself for things that you might not have seen or things that you didn't know about, but also the other party or the other parties involved, because that's one of the biggest ways of staying stuck and actually becoming bitter and resentful is the forgiveness thing. But I think that's a whole episode on its own. But I think also one of the other things is to really, we talked earlier about taking control of your mind, because we can put ourselves in some sort of prison almost and create this really powerful loop in our minds that I can't trust anybody. It doesn't matter who I get close to, they're going to let me down, they're going to leave, or they're going to cheat on me, or, whatever story that is. And in many ways that becomes a self-perpetuating reality, because we project these kind of feelings that we have about distrust and disconnect onto somebody else. And, that's not a healthy environment for a relationship to evolve or develop in.
That's so true. And I really want to underscore the hope piece. Hope is so powerful, though. And I want to share something that one of my best friends, when I called off my wedding, I remember she was going to be my maid of honor, and we were just talking about it. And I just thought, again, I was 34, I was young, but in that moment, I thought that was it. I'd had my shot. There'd been this really wonderful man who proposed marriage to me. And for whatever reason, which we talked about on your podcast, all the reasons, it didn't work out. And I remember looking at Heather and saying, Heather, I just don't think it's going to happen for me. I don't think I'm going to find true love. I have a lot of other wonderful things in my life, my family, my career, my friends, my travels, my hobbies. I have a great life. So I'm just going to be thankful for all of that. And I'm just going to let go of the hope that I'm going to ever meet the one. And she said to me, Karen, that's okay. I'm going to have hope for you. I'm going to hold out hope for you until you can have hope again. And that was such a beautiful word of encouragement and support that I really needed to hear. I never forgot it. And in the midst of what I encourage my single listeners, and I'm sure you do as well with your clients, Ané, I encourage people, work hard at being okay on your own, because the strength that you have being happy on your own helps you make those choices, because you're like, I'm okay. I'm good on my own. So I'm looking for love. I'm not giving up on love, but I can't compromise and settle. So being happy and hopeful and positive alone is so important. But you also need your tribe. You need your friends. I'm a big fan of your your single lady girlfriends to support you, because there's going to be times where you're going to have dark moments and you're going to lose hope. And then the girls are there for you and they say, you know what? I got you. You don't need hope tonight. I've got your hope for you.
Love it. Oh, that really got into my deepest heart of hearts. That's amazing. That is amazing. I'm sure that's going to mean a lot to a lot of people who's heard that.
I share things that I wish I had, information that I wish had been available to me when I was going through those rough seasons. And so I hope that what we share will be meaningful and powerful and encouraging. Ané, do you have any other parting thoughts to listeners, specifically about dating after divorce or dating in general, or anything you want to share with them? And then, of course, please let listeners know where to find you.
I just think something that meant a huge amount to me was as I went through those very, very dark times, I came across this Rumi quote, and it said, "Your task is not to seek love. Your task is only to discover the barriers that you've built against love." And I found that so incredibly comforting, actually, because it said to me at that point in time, it said to me that, Ané, where and how and when this is going to happen for you is none of your business. That is life's business. And it's going to be amazing, and it's going to happen for you when the time is right, when you're ready. So, just leave that to life. It's going to come, it's going to happen. Okay. But your business is to do your work. Your business is to go and find the ways that you have built barriers up against love. And basically that just means to get to the root and get to the bottom of why things haven't worked out for you so far. The biggest thing, and I believe the biggest gift that you can give yourself when it comes to yourself and your relationships and even your family, if you want to have one, because often we can break the cycle of dysfunction in our families by doing our own work, is to do whatever it takes to get yourself in the most confident, strong, authentic and aligned place you can possibly be. And from that place, you will attract the right person for you. From that place, you will have healthy relationships. So that would be my takeaway, is to find out what your work is and do it.
I think that's a beautiful and powerful reframe. Your job isn't to look for love, but to remove any barriers that you may be unwittingly putting up.
Because there's so much of it is under the surface. It's hidden. Right? Been with us for many, many years. But, when I was little, my understanding of love, what I learned about love and relationship was that it was drama, it was very hard work, and I had to do things a certain way. I had to achieve, and I had to be like little perfect, little Miss Perfect, the little good girl, to get the love and affection and validation that I needed and wanted. And then if I made a mistake or I messed up, then it got taken away just as easily. And it was very unpredictable. I did not have a sense of that you can just be loved for who you are, and that was enough and good enough. So it's no surprise whatsoever that I then repeated those patterns throughout my adult life. It got me into trouble specifically in my first marriage. And it's still, till this day, I still need to fight that kind of, is this good enough? Is this going to be okay? Because it's, but now that I'm aware of it, now that I've done the work around it, it's an ongoing process. But, it massively influenced my understanding of relationships and my relationship dynamics. So that's just, just as a practical example. And I find that when I work with my clients, when all is said and done, we always go back to these kind of things that are running the show behind the scenes. And that's where the real work is.
No, thank you for that practical example. We talk about that in family systems therapy, the recapitulation of family of origin issues. So whatever we haven't been able to work through in our childhood, which we are kids, we don't have the tools or the capability to work through these emotional issues. So we tend to bring those to our relationships in adulthood and oftentimes try to work it out in adulthood. And so to the extent that we can do that emotional work, with our adult mind now, with that sense of adult objectivity to say, this is my pattern. And what's that about? And it's not working. So now as an adult, I do have a choice. In childhood, we don't have a choice. We're born into a family and we got to make the best of it for 18 years. But once we are in our adult life with our adult mindset and our objectivity, then that's where the power is to make changes. But oftentimes it takes a couple failed relationships before we fully have clarity on that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.
And thank you also so much for coming on the show. Please let listeners know where to find you on social media, your website, and so forth. And also, do you work across the Atlantic? Could any listeners sign on with your coaching?
Absolutely. I work all across the world. I've got clients in LA and New York and Australia and up and down the country here in England. So, yes, I absolutely work online. And my website is very easy to remember. It's just datingcoach.uk. datingcoach.uk. I'm on Instagram, Ané Dating Coach, Twitter, Dating Coach. Email is ané@datingcoach.uk. So very, very easy. So yeah, any questions or comments or anything that I can clarify, I'd be happy to. There is a link that I maybe can provide to your listeners, which is just a free gift, and it's one of the tools that I use with my clients. But it's around 7 questions to uncover your hidden blocks when it comes to love. And it's like for those who like journaling, especially, it's 7 key questions with lots of guided prompts and so on. And it's a very popular tool that I use with my clients. And it goes deep, and the stuff that comes out is really helpful.
Well, that would be great. Thank you so much for providing that. And we will let our listeners and followers, we'll let them see some Instagram posts when we connect this summer when I'm in the UK. And so thank you so much for the invitation to come out to Bath. I'm so excited to meet face to face, and this is going to be a real treat. And so everyone follow along, and you will see us when we get like 2 little schoolgirls all giddy to see their BFF for the first time. So Exactly. Thanks again, Ané. I appreciate it so much and look forward to seeing you soon.
I'll see you very soon. Thanks, Karen, and thank you to your listeners. Take care.
So the love and life hack for this week is you have a confirmation bias. Is it working for you or against you? Take charge of your thoughts. Take charge of your life. This is Dr. Karen Anderson Abril. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, make it a great week.
Dr. Karen Love and Life is produced by Chip Gregory, senior producer Michelle Mousseau, and host and executive producer Dr. Karen Anderson Abril.